Captain Vesh had seen 3 kinds of derelicts in her 20 years of void walking: the gutted, the haunted, and the ones that were never really empty. The moment she saw the Carthage Dawn's running lights still burning after 2 centuries of silence, she knew which kind this was, and she boarded it anyway. The distress beacon had been screaming into the void for longer than Vesh had been alive. Automated, mechanical, patient. The Bitter Prophet's detection array had caught it during a routine drift through the halo stars, that lawless frontier where imperial authority dissolved into cosmic static and opportunity bred like bacteria in a corpse. Contact confirmed, Harrow announced from the pilot's throne, his fingers dancing across controls worn smooth by nervous habit. Emperor-class merchant vessel, registry Carthage Dawn, reported missing 207 years ago. He paused, and Vesh heard the hunger creep into his voice. Auger scans reading intact hull, active power generation, and throne preserve us, full cargo manifest. Vesh leaned over his shoulder, close enough to smell the low-stick residue and desperation that clung to him like a second skin. The scanner display painted the derelict in wireframe green, rotating slowly in the black. Too intact, too perfect. Ships didn't survive 2 centuries in the void looking like they'd just left port. Life signs? She asked, though she already knew. Negative. Atmosphere's stable, gravity's functional, but nothing's moving in there. Harrow's augmetic eye whirred as it focused, the lens clicking with each zoom increment. Wait. Vesh, I'm detecting 3 other salvage transponders. Close proximity, maybe 200 meters off the Dawn's hull. Hail them. Harrow's fingers worked the Vox controls. Static answered. He cycled through frequencies, each one returning the same empty hiss. Nothing, Captain. Transponders are active, but no response. No power signatures either. They're just dark. Mira moved from her position at the weapons station, her combat boots striking the deck with the rhythmic precision of parade ground drilling she'd never fully shed. 20 years out of the Astra Militarum, and she still walked like she expected inspection. 3 dead salvage crews, and we're considering going in. Her scarred hand rested on the las pistol at her hip. Comfort gesture, muscle memory. That's not a red flag, Captain. That's a crimson banner the size of a knight's war standard. Noted, Vesh said, her voice flat. Kyle emerged from the Bitter Prophet's machine shrine with the scent of sacred oils and ozone clinging to his red robes. His augmetic enhancements clicked and whirred with each movement. More machine than man now, exactly how he preferred it. The tech priest's organic eye was bloodshot from lack of sleep, but his bionic one glowed with steady green luminescence. The Omnissiah's wisdom suggests caution, Captain. A vessel of that class, fully loaded, represents approximately 4 million thrones in salvageable components. 6 million if the cargo is archaeotech or classified military equipment. And our debt? Vesh asked quietly. 2 million thrones, due in 17 days. Kyle's binary count chittered softly, anxiety manifesting through his augmetics. The Vaneshi Syndicate does not negotiate extensions. Vesh closed her eyes. She could still feel the Enforcer's shock maul against her ribs from their last reminder visit. Could still hear them describe, in clinical detail, what they'd do to her crew when the debt came due. Harrow's family, Mira's pension account, even Tobin's little sister in Scholar. Captain. Tobin's voice cracked on the title. The medic was 23 and looked younger, his uniform still crisp despite 3 months aboard. He carried his medkit like a talisman, fingers constantly checking the straps. What do we do? Vesh opened her eyes and stared at the Carthage Dawn's image. Those running lights, burning steady after 200 years. Green and gold, port and starboard, exactly as regulation demanded. Beautiful. Wrong. We board, she said. Harrow, bring us to docking distance. Mira, full combat loadout. Kyle, prepare breach equipment. Tobin. She turned to the medic, saw the fear naked on his face. Stay sharp and stay close. Vesh, Mira started. That's an order. The approach took 18 minutes. 18 minutes of watching the Carthage Dawn grow from a wireframe schematic to a physical reality that filled the viewport like a steel cathedral. 18 minutes of silence broken only by the bitter prophet's atmospheric processors and the crew's increasingly labored breathing. The Derelict was pristine. No meteor scarring pocked its hull, no radiation burns from stellar winds, no void corrosion eating at its armor plating. It hung in space like it had been placed there yesterday, a museum piece suspended in amber. The running lights pulsed in perfect rhythm, and through the viewport, Vesh could see interior illumination glowing behind intact plastic windows. "This is wrong," Mira whispered. "Ships don't look like this after 2 centuries. They shouldn't." Kyle had interfaced directly with the bitter prophet's sensor array, data cables running from ports in his skull to the ship's machine spirit. His human eye had rolled back, showing only white, while his augmetic processed the scan results. Detecting rhythmic electromagnetic pulses from the interior, he reported, his voice modulated by Vox synthesis. Frequency approximately 0.87 Hz. Pattern suggests, no, that's impossible. What? Vesh demanded. The pattern suggests intentional broadcast, as if something inside is calling. Harrow brought them in slowly, the docking clamps extending with hydraulic precision. Through the viewport, Vesh watched the Carthage Dawn's airlock draw closer. The exterior hatch bore a faded Imperial Aquila and ship designation in Gothic script. No damage. No forced entry marks. The airlock keypad still glowed with ready light. The docking clamps connected with a shudder that ran through the bitter prophet's spine. Magnetic seals engaged with heavy clanks that sounded too much like cell doors slamming. Harrow killed the maneuvering thrusters, and suddenly, the only sound was their breathing and the omnipresent hum of life support. "Seals good," Harrow confirmed, voice unsteady. "Airlocks pressurized and waiting. It's like they knew we were coming." Vesh stood, checking her shotgun's load by muscle memory. Solid slug, then scattershot, alternating pattern. Beside her, Mira performed her own ritual. Las pistol, combat knife, frag grenades, photovisor. Kyle clutched an Archaeotech data slate like scripture, while Tobin's hands trembled as he secured his medkit. They cycled through the bitter prophet's airlock into the narrow docking umbilical. The tube flexed slightly with their movement, plastic creaking. Vesh took point, shotgun raised, moving with the cautious precision of someone who'd cleared too many derelicts and lived to regret it. The Carthage Dawn's outer airlock hatch opened at Kale's touch. No resistance, no forced override needed. It simply welcomed them. And that's when they found the first body. He was slumped in the airlock's corner, salvage's void suit still intact, helmet thrown aside. The corpse was fresh, couldn't have been dead more than a week, skin only beginning to show decomposition. But it was his face that made Vesh's breath catch. He was smiling, not the rictus of death, not frozen agony. A genuine expression of absolute joy, eyes wide and staring at something wonderful only he could see. His hands were outstretched, reaching toward the inner hatch, fingers bent in supplication or embrace. "Throne," Tobin breathed, pressing against the wall to avoid touching the body. Mira knelt beside the corpse, professional detachment sliding over her features like a mask. She checked his suit designation, independent salvager, registration traces to the Fortunate Son, one of the dark transponders we detected. Her gloved hand moved to his belt, retrieving a small Vox recorder. He made a log. She activated it. Static hissed, then a voice. Young, male, trembling with emotion that might have been fear or ecstasy. Day 3 aboard the Dawn. We found it. The cargo. I can't describe it. Beautiful doesn't cover it. The others they want to leave, say it's dangerous, but they're wrong, so wrong. The cargo, it sings, not with sound, but with meaning, purpose. It wants to go home. I understand now. We all will, soon. I'll help it. We'll all help it, The recording cut to screaming. Brief, wet, then silence. Mira crushed the recorder in her fist. We're leaving. Now. This is command, Captain. I'm invoking Article 7. Immediate withdrawal due to hostile environment. Vesh stared at the smiling corpse, at the reaching hands, at the joy frozen on dead features. She thought of the Varnishy Syndicate's enforcers, of Tobin's sister, of Harrow's family, of 17 days and 2 million thrones, and the cold arithmetic of survival. No, she said quietly. We need this score. Vesh. I said no. That's an order, Mira. We proceed. The ex-guardswoman's jaw clenched, but discipline won out over survival instinct. It always did. Yes, Captain, but I'm filing formal protest in the ship's log. Noted. Vesh stepped over the body and approached the inner hatch. Kyle, get us inside. The tech priest's augmetic fingers interfaced with the control panel. The door unsealed with a pneumatic hiss that sounded too much like a sigh of relief. Beyond, corridor lights flickered in sequence, not malfunctioning, but deliberate, as if responding to their presence. One by one, illumination panels activated down the hallway, creating a pathway deeper into the ship. Like welcome, like invitation. The air that rushed out was breathable according to Kale's atmospheric analysis, but it tasted sweet on Vesh's tongue, cloying, wrong, like sugar left to ferment. They crossed the threshold, weapons raised, and the inner hatch sealed behind them with soft finality. The Carthage Dawn's interior was a study in wrongness. The corridor stretched before them, pristine and clean, deck plating polished to mirror shine. No dust, no debris, no signs of 2 centuries of abandonment. Emergency lighting cast everything in soft amber, creating shadows that seemed deeper than they should be. Atmosphere is stable, Carl reported, his augmetic sensors sweeping the space. Oxygen-nitrogen mix within human tolerance. Temperature 21 degrees Celsius. Gravity at 1.03 imperial standard. He paused, head tilting in a gesture that was disturbingly inhuman. The ship's machine spirit is active. More than active. It's aware. As if in response, a speaker crackled to life above them. A voice emerged. Female, warm, maternal. The kind of voice that sang lullabies and promised everything would be all right. Welcome home, little ones, it said, each word wrapped in digital affection. The others are sleeping. Would you like to see them? Ship's AI, Kale breathed, wonder creeping into his synthesized voice. Intact after 2 centuries, the Omnissiah's blessing. Or curse, Mira interrupted, weapon trained on the speaker. This old shouldn't still be coherent. I am Mother, the voice continued, ignoring the interruption. I have kept the house clean. I have kept the lights on. I have been waiting for you. You've come such a long way. Are you hungry? Tired? Would you like me to sing you a song? Vesh's skin crawled. Kale, find a data port. Get into the ship's logs. I want to know what happened here. The tech priest located an access terminal 20 meters down the corridor, its interface still glowing with ready status. His mechadendrites extended, data spikes interfacing with ports that should have been corroded beyond function. His human eye glazed over as his consciousness dove into the Carthage Dawn's data core. Minutes passed. Cale's body remained rigid, fingers twitching as he navigated the ship's memory. When he finally disconnected, his organic eye was bleeding from the corner. "The logs are corrupted," he said hoarsely, "deliberately fragmented. But I recovered fragments." His voice took on the flat quality of recitation. "Manifest entry, 2 centuries past. Cargo loaded from..." He glitched, binary cant screaming through his vox. Location data expunged. Captain's orders logged. No crew member is to open hold Tertius under any circumstances. No one looks at the... Another glitch. Worse. Classification level expunged. Final entry. Day 3 after warp translation. We can hear it. All of us. The cargo is singing. "And then?" Vesh demanded. "Then nothing. No further logs. No distress signals. Just silence." Kyle's augmetic eye flickered. And the mother AI activating, keeping the ship alive for 207 years. Waiting. The temperature dropped. Not gradually. Instantly. 15 degrees in the space between heartbeats. Vesh's breath misted, and frost began crystallizing on the corridor walls in fractal patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Environmental systems malfunction," Tobin suggested weakly, huddling into his uniform. "No," Cale said, staring at his readouts. "The environmental systems are operating perfectly. This is intentional." Mother's voice returned, now singing softly. "Hush, little salvager. Don't make a sound. Mother's going to show you what she found. And if that treasure makes you smile, Mother's going to make it all worthwhile." "Moving," Vesh commanded. "We find the cargo hold, assess value and extract. 30 minutes maximum. Stay together, stay alert." They advanced down the primary corridor, boots echoing on polished deck plates. The pathway ahead was straight, well lit, showing clear route to the ship's central sections. No obstacles, no blocked passages. Too easy. They'd gone maybe 50 meters when every light on the ship shut off simultaneously. Darkness swallowed them whole. Not the darkness of normal blackout, but absolute absence. Thick and suffocating, pressing against their eyes like a physical weight. Vesh activated her photovisor, but the infrared revealed only her crew's heat signatures. And in that darkness, she heard breathing. 5 sources, rhythmic, perfectly synchronized with her own inhale-exhale pattern. With mirrors, with Cale's mechanical ventilations, with Tobin's panicked gasps, with Harrow's ragged pulls of air. 5 sources mimicking their breathing exactly, coming from somewhere ahead in the black. "Contact," Mira hissed, weapon raised to firing position. "I don't," Vesh started. The light snapped back on with blinding intensity. The corridor was empty. No figures, no crew. Nothing but pristine deck plates and amber lighting, and that sweet wrong smell in the air. But there were footprints, wet footprints, as if someone had stepped through liquid, leading away from their position deeper into the ship. 5 sets, human-sized. Recent enough that moisture still glistened on the deck, heading toward the cargo holds. "Throne," Harrow whispered. "What?" Mother's voice interrupted, singing through every speaker at once, the maternal tone now edged with something that might have been anticipation. "Hush, little salvager. Don't say a word. Mother's going to show you something absurd. When that something makes you weep, Mother's going to sing you all to sleep." Vesh's helmet display flickered. Just once. For a single frame, her biometric scanner showed the life signs aboard the Carthage Dawn. Not 5, 10. The display corrected itself instantly, but Vesh had seen it. had seen the 5 extra signatures overlapping with her crew's positions exactly, occupying the same space, the same coordinates, behind them, inside them, wearing them like shadows wear flesh. She opened her mouth to give the abort order, but deeper in the ship, from the direction of the cargo holds, something began to sing. Chapter 2. The Geometry of Madness. Vesh had learned in the guard that fear was acceptable, panic was fatal. But when she saw what the second salvage crew had done to themselves in the mess hall, she felt something worse than panic: recognition. She'd seen this pattern before, carved into the walls of a condemned shrine world, right before Inquisition orbital bombardment turned it to glass. The wet footprints had led them through 3 decks, always ahead, always fresh, until they'd reached the crew quarters section. The mess hall doors stood open like a mouth, amber emergency lighting spilling into the corridor. The sweet smell was stronger here, mixing with something else, copper and rot and burned ozone. "Emperor's mercy," Tobin whispered, and then he was stumbling to the corner, retching. 12 bodies lay arranged in a perfect spiral on the mess hall floor, not scattered by violence, not fallen in panic, arranged, positioned with mathematical precision, each corpse exactly equidistant from its neighbors, limbs extended at identical angles. They wore salvager gear, independent contractors by the mismatched equipment, and every single face wore that same expression of transcendent joy. But it was what had been done to them that made Vesh's training fail her. Each body was missing specific organs. One had no heart, another lacked lungs, a third showed an empty cavity where kidneys should be, liver, intestines, stomach. 12 bodies, 12 missing pieces, surgically extracted with precision that suggested either expert medical knowledge or something worse, intimate understanding of human anatomy from the inside. The organs sat in the spiral's center, arranged in their own smaller pattern, still glistening, still fresh enough that Vesh could smell them. "They did this to each other," Mira said, voice flat with shock. Her pistol swept the room, finding no targets, no threats, just the dead arranged like some obscene art installation. "Look at their hands, surgical implements. They took turns. They cooperated." Kyle had moved to the walls, his augmetic eye scanning the surfaces. His organic eye had gone wide, pupil dilated, and his hands trembled. The first time Vesh had ever seen the tech priest display genuine fear. The walls were covered in equations, written in blood, layer upon layer, mathematical formulae that hurt to look at directly. Not because of the gore, but because they seemed to shift when observed. Variables changed positions, numbers inverted. The very geometry of the symbols rejected the eye's attempt to follow them, creating a visual paradox that made Vesh's head pound. "This mathematics," Kale said, his voice glitching with distortion. "It's not human. It's recursive, self-referential. Each equation contains itself infinitely." His mechadendrites reached toward the wall, then jerked back as if burned. "Looking at it makes my cogitators crash. It's antimatter to logic. It's..." He staggered, binary cant screaming through his Vox speakers. "It's beautiful." "Kale, step away from the wall," Vesh commanded. But the tech priest was transfixed, tears running from his organic eye, while his augmetic flickered with cascading errors. Mira grabbed Kale's robes and physically hauled him backward. "Snap out of it, priest. That's an order." Kyle blinked, shuddered, then seemed to return to himself. "Apologies, Captain. The patterns, they contain information. Data beyond human capacity to process, but my augmetics attempted to interpret." He touched his temple, where blood was now leaking from beneath his cranial ports. "The Omnissiah's light cannot reach this place." Vesh forced herself to move deeper into the mess hall, stepping carefully around the spiral of corpses. A security terminal still functioned on the far wall, its screen glowing with ready status. She activated the playback system, scrolling through timestamps. "Here," she said, 3 days ago, the second salvage crew enters the mess hall. The footage played. 12 salvagers entered, talking, gesturing, normal human behavior. They were discussing the cargo holds, debating whether to proceed. An argument was building, voices raised, when suddenly they all stopped. Simultaneously, mid-word, mid-gesture, frozen like someone had hit pause on reality itself. Then, as one, 12 heads turned toward the camera. 12 faces smiled, and they began. The footage showed 6 hours compressed into minutes. The salvagers worked with methodical precision, taking turns with surgical implements. No screaming, no resistance. Each person waited patiently for their turn, smiling that terrible smile while others operated. They painted equations on the walls between procedures, sometimes pausing to admire their work. When they arranged the organs in the center, they did so with the reverence of priests building an altar. The last one, a woman with grey hair tied back in regulation braid, finished positioning her own extracted liver, then lay down in the final position of the spiral. She stared at the camera with those joyful eyes until the light faded from them. The entire time, she never stopped smiling. Tobin had returned, wiping his mouth, and caught the last minute of footage. They weren't forced. They wanted to. Why would they want to? Because they saw something, Vesh said quietly. Something that made this seem like the logical response. Mira's weapon snapped toward Vesh, not quite aiming, but close. "How do you know that, Captain? How do you recognize this pattern?" The question hung in the recycled air. Vesh met Mira's gaze and saw the guard training asserting itself. Threat assessment, pattern recognition, the growing suspicion of command. She'd been expecting this, dreading it. "Because I've seen it before," Vesh admitted. 20 years ago, Kaltos 4. The name meant nothing to most of them, but Kale's augmetic eye flared with recognition. His fingers moved in unconscious data query gestures. Kaltos 4, Shrine World, population 6 million, declared Perdita, and subjected to exterminatus by inquisitorial order. Official records list cause as catastrophic warp contamination. He stared at Vesh. "You were there." "I was guard, fresh out of Scholar, assigned to the 47th Cadian. We were sent to investigate reports of cult activity in Hive Primus." Vesh's voice was distant, seeing things 20 years gone. They'd found something in an archaeological dig beneath the city, called it the Singing Stone. Within a week, the entire hive went silent. When we deployed, we found... She stopped, swallowed, continued. "We found them arranged in patterns. Hundreds of thousands of them throughout the hive. Geometric designs spanning entire city blocks. They'd killed each other over the course of one night, and they'd done it with precision. Purpose." Her hand touched the mess hall wall, fingertips tracing the blood-written equations without quite making contact. The same patterns, the same mathematics. I saw them in the central temple where they'd found the stone. "And," Harrow prompted, his voice shaking. "And my unit went inside. 12 of us. Only I came out." Vesh's jaw clenched. "I never told the debrief what I saw in there. The stone, it showed me things. Promised things. I felt it in my head, tasting my thoughts, learning me from the inside." She touched her temple unconsciously. "I ran, left my unit, abandoned my post. By the time I made it to the evacuation zone, the Inquisition had already declared Perdita. They glassed the entire planet from orbit 36 hours later." "Throne," Mira breathed. "And you think..." "The cargo," Kyle interrupted. his augmetic fingers flying across his data slate. "Captain, I'm accessing the ship's manifest through the security terminal. The Carthage Dawn's last recorded port of call before disappearance was..." His voice glitched with horrified understanding. "Kaltos 4. Cargo loaded 6 months before inquisitorial action. Classification: xenoarchaeological sample. Destination: Mars Mechanicus Research Station." The implications crashed through them like a pressure wave. "Someone tried to move it," Vesh said. "They loaded the Singing Stone onto this ship to transport it for study, but it activated during warp transit. And it's been here ever since," Harrow finished. "Waiting, calling, drawing in salvages for 200 years. Mother's voice emerged from every speaker, warm and proud like a parent praising a child's first steps. "You're doing so well, children." The others couldn't resist. They saw the truth and embraced it immediately. "But you're stronger, more resilient. Would you like to see what made them smile? Would you like to understand what they understood?" "No," Mira said flatly. "Negative. We're aborting. Now." "The debt," Harrow started. "Damn the debt. We stay here. We end up like them." Mira gestured at the spiral of corpses, arranged like furniture in someone's sick idea of interior decoration. "The cargo's value would exceed our debt threefold," Kyle said, and there was something wrong with his voice now. Too steady, too certain. His augmetic eye pulsed with light that didn't match its normal spectrum. "From a purely logical standpoint, the risk-reward ratio favors continuation." "Since when do you assess risk-reward?" Mira demanded. "You're a tech priest, not a merchant." Vesh's mind raced. 3 votes to continue: herself, Harrow, Kyle. 2 to abort: Mira and Tobin. Democratic deadlock broken by Captain's authority. But was that authority worth 5 lives? She thought of the Varneshian forces, of 17 days, of Tobin's sister and Harrow's family, and the cold arithmetic of survival in an uncaring galaxy. "We continue," she said, "but carefully. We assess the cargo from a distance. No direct contact, no touching. We confirm value, then decide." "This is exactly what they did," Mira said, voice tight with controlled anger. "The first crew, the second, the third. Just a little further, just see the cargo, just confirm the value. Then they're painting walls with their intestines." "Noted and logged," Vesh replied. "But we continue. Stay alert. Stay together." They moved out, leaving the mess hall and its spiral of joy-frozen corpses behind. The corridor beyond sloped downward, leading toward the ship's lower decks where cargo holds were typically located. The wet footprints continued, always ahead, always leading deeper. Tobin stumbled, catching himself against the wall. "Did anyone else hear that?" His voice was strained, eyes unfocused. "Hear what?" Vesh asked. "My sister. I heard my sister's voice. She's supposed to be in Schola on Cipramundi, but I just heard her calling my name." Harrow had gone pale, weapon raised at shadows that weren't there. "They're here. The collectors. The Varneshi sent them. They found us. They..." He blinked, shook his head violently. No, that's not... They're not here. I know they're not here." Kyle had stopped walking, staring at his data slate. Information scrolled across the screen faster than human eyes could follow. Schematics, formulae, designs for technologies that shouldn't exist. "I'm not accessing this data," he said wonderingly. "It's accessing me. The ship's machine spirit is showing me how to build. I don't even have words for what I'm seeing." "Everyone stop," Vesh ordered. "Right now, full halt." They obeyed, but reluctantly, as if walking deeper into the ship had become the natural state, and stopping required conscious effort. Vesh noticed her own breathing had synchronized with the others again. all five inhaling and exhaling in perfect rhythm. When had that started? "This is exactly what Mira warned us about," Vesh said, forcing clarity through the fog creeping into her thoughts. "We're being affected. Whatever's in the cargo hold, it's already in our heads." They'd reached a junction. 3 corridors branched off, each leading downward at different angles. Each route presumably connected to the cargo hold system via different access points. Emergency lighting illuminated all 3 paths equally. At the junction's center, 2 more bodies waited. The 3rd salvage crew, only 2 of them. A man and a woman, locked in embrace, faces pressed together in what might have been a kiss. Both still smiling. Both with lapistol wounds directly through the heart. Entry wounds, suggesting they'd shot each other simultaneously at point-blank range. Scattered around them were papers, pages torn from logbooks, covered in handwriting. Tobin knelt, carefully not touching the corpses, and retrieved one. "It's a love letter," he said, voice breaking. He's writing to her about how much he loves her, how they'll be together forever, how she's the only thing that matters in the galaxy. He picked up another page. This one's from her to him. Same thing. Declarations of eternal devotion. Kyle scanned the papers with his augmetics. Handwriting analysis suggests these were written in the hours before death, but cross-referencing with the salvage crew's ship records, he paused, processing. They'd never met before boarding this vessel. They were from different ships, different systems. They encountered each other here. And within hours, they loved each other enough to die together, Mira said. Whatever's down there, it doesn't just make you see things. It rewrites what you feel, what you want, who you are. Mother's voice returned, and now it sounded almost excited. "The cargo hold is through any door, children. All paths lead home. You've been so patient, so brave. But first, you must answer a question." The maternal warmth took on an edge of playful curiosity. "Which of you loves the others most?" All 3 doors unlocked simultaneously. The magnetic seals disengaged with heavy clunks that echoed through the junction. Beyond each threshold, darkness waited, broken only by faint blue luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. Behind Vesh, the wet breathing sound returned. Closer now, intimate, like someone standing directly at her shoulder, matching her respirations perfectly. She turned. The corridor wall was polished metal, still pristine after 2 centuries, reflecting like a dark mirror. In that reflection, Vesh saw herself, exhausted, scarred, haunted. And standing directly behind her reflection, she saw something else. It had too many angles, geometry that refused to resolve into coherent shape, a form that was simultaneously tall and small, near and distant, solid and transparent. Where its face should be, there was only recursive complexity, patterns within patterns, each containing all the others infinitely, but it had eyes. 2 points of blue light that burned with something that wasn't quite intelligence, wasn't quite malevolence, but was absolutely, perfectly aware. Vesh spun, weapon raised, nothing. The corridor behind her was empty, just amber lighting and polished deck plates, and that sweet wrong smell. She looked back at the reflection. The figure was still there, still standing behind her mirror self, and as she watched, she saw it standing behind Mira's reflection too, and Kale's, and Harrow's, and Tobin's. The same impossible figure, occupying the same space behind each of them simultaneously. "Can you see it?" she whispered. "In the reflection, can you—" "I can hear it thinking," Tobin interrupted. His voice was dreamy, distant. He was staring at nothing, pupils dilated to black pools. A smile was beginning to form at the corners of his mouth. "It's so beautiful. The mathematics, the pattern. I understand now. I understand what they felt, why they smiled. Blood began running from his nose. Slow at first, then faster, crimson streaming over his smiling lips. His fingers moved unconsciously, tracing equations in the air, solving problems written in the fabric of reality itself. It's not evil, he continued, that terrible smile growing. It's lonely. It's been alone for so long, and we can help it. We can make it complete. Tobin, look at me, Vesh commanded. But the medic's eyes had gone distant, seeing something beyond the physical world. In the reflection, the figure behind them all leaned closer. Close enough that Vesh could see its mouth open, an aperture filled with more recursive geometry, mathematical formulas made flesh, equations that solved for human consciousness and found it wanting. The blue eyes brightened with anticipation, and from the darkness beyond all three cargo hold doors, something began to sing. Chapter 3. Communion in the Dark. Kyle had replaced 60% of his flesh with sacred steel, believing that by becoming a machine, he'd transcended human weakness. But when the ship's whispers found the frequency of his neural implants, he learned that machines could scream too. And worse, they could pray to something that answered. Tobin collapsed. Not from injury, from ecstasy. His legs simply gave out as if his body had decided consciousness was optional. Blood poured from his nose, his ears, running in crimson streams that should have terrified him, but instead seemed to delight him. His smile stretched wider, impossibly wide, threatening to split his face. Tobin, stay with me. Vesh grabbed his uniform, hauling him back from the open cargo hold door. His body was dead weight, muscles gone slack, but his eyes remained fixed on that pulsing blue darkness beyond the threshold. Let me go, he whispered, voice dreamy and distant. Captain, please. I need to see. I need to understand. It's calling me by my name. My real name. The one I didn't know I had. Kyle, help me, Vesh shouted, struggling to hold the medic. He wasn't fighting her exactly, just trying to drift forward like a man caught in current, pulled inexorably toward drowning. Kyle moved toward the nearest door control panel, mechadendrites extending with pneumatic hisses. Securing doors, initiating emergency lockdown protocol. This is for the Omnissiah's glory, for the preservation of sacred life, for... His augmetic voice synthesizer glitched mid-word. Static erupted from his Vox speakers, modulating into something that wasn't language but felt like meaning. Binary cant twisted into recursive loops that solved for variables that shouldn't exist. Kyle. Mira's weapon tracked the tech priest's movements, professional paranoia overriding friendship. Kyle's hands, human and mechanical both, moved over the control panel. But they weren't following his commands. His fingers traced patterns across the interface, geometric sequences that made the screen flicker with cascading errors. His data slate lit up, display filling with the same blood-written equations they'd seen in the mess hall. I am the sum of infinite angles, Kale said, but it wasn't his voice anymore. His vocal synthesizer had found a frequency beyond human hearing and modulated it back down, creating harmonics that made teeth ache and eyes water. I am the space between thoughts. I am coming home, and I am bringing you with me. Fight it! Vesh released Tobin, let him slump against the wall, and grabbed Kale's shoulders. Tech priest, you're stronger than this. Your augmetics, your faith. My augmetics are a bridge, Kyle replied, and now his voice was layered, his own terrified consciousness beneath something vast and patient. The Omnissiah's gift makes me the perfect receiver. Metal conducts so much better than flesh. His mechanical eye began projecting light, not its normal spectrum, but something wrong. colors that didn't belong in real space. The light coalesced into holographic images floating in the junction's air. Figures. People in the uniforms of merchant crew, 2 centuries out of date. The original crew of the Carthage Dawn. "Watch," Kyle's corrupted voice commanded. "Witness what they witnessed. Learn what they learned." The hologram played like corrupted picked footage, images stuttering and jumping but coherent enough to tell the story. The cargo being loaded on Kaltos 4, a massive crystalline structure, barely contained in a shielded container, workers in hazmat suits refusing to look directly at it. The ship's captain arguing with Mechanicus representatives, demanding better containment protocols. Then, warp transit. The crew going about their duties normally for the first day. Then someone pausing mid-task, head tilting as if hearing distant music. Another crew member smiling for no reason. A third writing equations on a napkin during meal break. The hologram shifted to the captain's log entries, each one projected in sequence. But it was Kale's mouth that spoke the words, his vocal synthesizer reproducing the dead captain's voice with horrifying accuracy. Day 1. Cargo hold Tertius sealed as per Mechanicus protocol. Several crew members report auditory phenomena, hymns in languages they don't recognize. Ship's Medici attributes to warp translation stress. I've ordered increased psychosuppression field strength. The hologram jumped forward. The crew looked haggard now, dark circles under eyes, movements jerky and uncoordinated. Day 2. The hymns are getting louder. Crew reports feeling observed from within, not from outside, from within their own thoughts. The cargo container remains sealed, but everyone knows what's inside. We all know now. It's singing to us, teaching us its name. Another jump. The crew moved with eerie synchronization now, all facing the same direction, toward the cargo holds. Their expressions were rapt, worshipful. Day 3. We understand now. It's not trapped with us. We're trapped with it. And it's so very, very lonely. It's been alone for longer than human civilization has existed. It just wants to go home. We're going to help it. We're building a resonance chamber. When we're done, it can finally sing loudly enough for the universe to hear, and everyone will understand. Everyone will smile. The hologram showed the final hours, the crew working in perfect coordination, tearing apart sections of the ship, rearranging bulkheads and power conduits according to alien mathematics, building, creating, reshaping the Carthage Dawn into something that was part ship, part temple, part tuning fork for realities that shouldn't touch. Then, one by one, they lay down in precise positions throughout the newly transformed cargo hold and stopped breathing. Still smiling, still aware. Their consciousness uploaded into the structure they'd built, becoming part of the resonance, part of the song. The ship emerged from warp translation with no living crew. Just the artifact, singing its patient song into the void, waiting for someone to hear. Emperor's throne, Harrow breathed, his face ashen. They're still in there. 200 years later, they're still conscious, still part of it. Kyle's projection flickered out. His mechanical eye returned to normal spectrum, and for a moment his own voice broke through. Captain, I can't. It's in my cogitators. It's rewriting my machine spirit. Help me. Then the corruption reasserted control, and Kale began walking toward the center cargo hold door. His movements were precise, measured, and completely against his will. No. Mira moved to intercept, but Kale's mechadendrites lashed out faster than human reflexes, forcing her back. She raised her last pistol, finger on the trigger, and nothing. The weapon didn't fire. The power cell was charged, the firing mechanism functional, but her finger wouldn't complete the pull. Tears ran down Mira's scarred face, cutting tracks through grime and fear. "Why can't I shoot?" she whispered, voice breaking. "I've shot heretics, traitors, Xenos. Why can't I pull the trigger on him?" "Because you care," Vesh said quietly, understanding flooding through her. "Because despite everything, despite the corruption, he's still your crew, still your friend." Harrow had backed against the wall, laughing. High-pitched, hysterical giggles that built into full-throated guffaws that shook his entire frame. "We're going to die rich," he howled between laughs, pulling at his hair with both hands. "That's the joke. The cargo's worth millions. We'll clear the debt. We'll be free. We just have to die first. Isn't that funny? Isn't that perfectly cosmically hilarious?" His laughter echoed through the junction, bouncing off walls, mixing with Tobin's blissful murmuring and Kale's corrupted binary cant until the sounds became a kind of harmony, discordant and wrong, but somehow fitting together. Vesh felt it then, the moment of clarity that cut through fear like a knife through flesh. She saw the pattern, not just the geometric designs, but the larger pattern. 20 years of her life suddenly made horrible sense. Kaltos IV, the singing stone, her survival when everyone else died. She hadn't escaped. She'd been released. "O throne," she whispered. "O Emperor, preserve me. I've been the beacon all along." Every salvage site she'd led her crews to, every derelict they'd explored, every close call, every narrow escape, she'd always attributed it to skill, to experience, to survivor's instinct. But now she saw the truth. She'd been drawing them to places where the veil was thin, where the song could reach, feeding it. "You understand now," Mother's voice said, and all the maternal warmth was gone. What remained was ancient, tired and infinitely sad. "I tried to warn them, all of them, every crew that answered the beacon. But you meet things always think you're different, special, stronger. What are you?" Vesh demanded, still holding Tobin, watching Kale advance toward the door. "You're not just a ship's AI." "I am what remains of the original crew," Mother replied. In their last moments of sanity, they uploaded themselves, not to serve the artifact, but to contain it. We sacrificed our individual consciousness to become a prison. For 200 years we have fought, held it back, kept it from manifesting fully in real space. The temperature dropped again. Frost crystallized on every surface, forming patterns that hurt to perceive. "But we're failing," Mother continued. "Every salvage crew that boards feeds it, makes it stronger. It's not trying to escape, it's trying to birth itself, to push through into your reality fully. And it needs specific elements, specific types of consciousness to complete the resonance." Vesh's blood ran cold. "What types?" "The faithful," Mother said, and lights flashed over Tobin's prone form. "One who believes without question. The augmented," Kyle still walking. "One who bridges flesh and machine. The warrior," Mira, weapon raised uselessly. "One who has killed and carries the weight. The desperate," Harrow laughing and crying simultaneously. "One who has everything to lose. And the guilty," the lights settled on Vesh. "One who has survived when others died. One who carries the mark." "Previous crews," Vesh started. "None had the right composition. Close, but not perfect. One crew had 4 of 5. They failed because the desperate one resisted. Another had 3. Barely made it past the mess hall before tearing each other apart." Mother's voice held something like admiration now. "But you're perfect. The artifact has been learning from every attempt, refining its song. And it chose you 20 years ago, Vesh. Marked you on Kaltos 4. Everyone you've brought to salvage sites, every crew member you've hired, they all fed it through you. You've been its prophet, its beacon, its harbinger. No, Vesh whispered, but memory confirmed it. Every salvager who'd worked with her and died, every close call, every nightmare she'd dismissed as trauma, all of it leading here. The moment you touched this ship, Mother said, it was already touching you back. Kyle reached the cargo hold door. It opened at his approach, responding to his corrupted augmetics. Beyond, the blue light intensified, pulsing in rhythm with something vast and patient. Mira tried again to shoot. Her finger wouldn't move. She dropped the weapon and drew her combat knife instead, but her legs wouldn't carry her forward. She collapsed to her knees, tears streaming, slamming a fist against the deck in impotent rage. Harrow's laughter had turned to sobs. My family. Oh, throne, my family. They're going to kill them because I'm going to die here. I'm going to die rich and useless, and they're going to suffer for it. Then reality itself began to shift. Gravity reversed in localized pockets. Vesh found herself floating, still gripping Tobin, both of them drifting in different directions as the ship's orientation became negotiable. Mira tumbled past, reaching for purchase that didn't exist. Harrow screamed as he fell upward. Through the chaos, the massive doors to hold Tertius ground open on servos that had waited 2 centuries for this moment. Light poured out, not blue now, but something worse. A color that existed between colors, that was simultaneously all wavelengths and none, that was the visual equivalent of the recursive equations written in blood. In that light, shapes moved. Geometric impossibilities that shifted perspective with every nanosecond. Angles that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. Forms that were simultaneously vast and microscopic. Distant and intimate, solid and transparent. And behind it all, something was singing. Not with sound, with pure meaning, transmitted directly into the consciousness, bypassing ears and brain, and going straight to the soul. Tobin broke free from Vesh's grip. He oriented himself in the zero gravity, smiling that terrible smile, and pushed off toward the light. His arms were outstretched, welcoming. The equations he'd carved into his own flesh began glowing with the same wrong-colored light. Mother says we're home, he called back, voice filled with rapture. Finally home. After so long in the cold and dark, finally somewhere warm. He crossed the threshold into Hold Tertius. The light took him. His body stretched, distorted, became part of the geometry inside. Vesh could still see him, or what he'd become, still smiling, still aware, still Tobin, but also something more and something less. Part of the pattern, part of the song. Vesh's last rational thought crystallized with perfect, horrifying clarity. The Inquisition didn't destroy Kaltos 4 to stop the cult. They did it because something answered the cult's call, and they couldn't kill it. They could only bury it under a planet's worth of glass and pray it stayed sleeping. But someone had dug it up, loaded it onto a ship, and now it was awake. Now it was hungry. Now it was almost complete. Chapter 4. What the cargo hold contains. There are horrors in the galaxy that the Imperium has names for. Demons, Xenos, heretics. But Vesh stood at the threshold of Hold Tertius and understood why some classifications in inquisitorial archives are simply marked forget, because the human mind isn't meant to remember what she was seeing and survive intact. The cargo hold was larger inside than the ship's external dimensions allowed, not metaphorically, literally. Vesh's distance-measuring laser couldn't find the far wall. The beams simply disappeared into impossible space that folded back on itself, creating a pocket of reality that existed partially outside real space. The walls breathed. Metal bulkheads expanded and contracted with organic rhythm, each breath revealing glimpses of what lay beneath, not wiring and structural supports, but something that looked disturbingly like nervous tissue, pulsing with bioluminescent light. The floor existed in multiple states simultaneously: solid deck plating, liquid mercury, crystalline lattice, empty void. Her boots touched all of them, and none of them with each step. At the center of this impossible space stood the singing stone. It was massive, easily 10 meters tall, a crystalline structure of fractal geometry that repeated itself infinitely inward and outward. Each facet reflected not what was in front of it, but what could be, what might be, what the universe would look like if mathematics were rewritten according to different fundamental constants. Blues and purples dominated, but also colors that had no names, wavelengths that shouldn't exist in natural light. And it was singing, not with sound, with pure information transmitted directly into consciousness. Each note was a complete understanding of some aspect of reality: how stars formed, why time flowed forward, what thoughts tasted like, the texture of gravity, the sound of dying suns. Vesh felt each note carve itself into her brain, rewriting neural pathways to accommodate knowledge that human minds were never designed to hold. Tobin was already there, at the stone's base. Or what had been Tobin. His body had merged with the crystal's lower facets, flesh flowing into mineral, bone becoming lattice. But he was still conscious, still aware. His face protruded from the stone's surface, still smiling that beatific smile, eyes tracking their entrance. "It doesn't hurt, Captain." His voice came from everywhere and nowhere. From the stone itself, from the breathing walls, from inside Vesh's own skull. It's like finally understanding a joke everyone else has always known. All my life, I've been incomplete. But here, as part of the pattern, I'm whole. I'm home. Kyle was walking toward the stone now, his corrupted augmetics pulling him forward step by agonizing step. His human eye was wide with terror, tears streaming, but his mechanical components had surrendered completely. His vocal synthesizer emitted a constant stream of binary cant that had become prayer, worship directed at something that answered. "Fight it, Kale," Vesh shouted, her own feet moving forward against her will. The gravity was still wrong, still shifting, making each step a negotiation with physics. Around the stone, arranged in concentric circles like the rings of an obscene planet, were all the others. All the previous victims, all the previous crews, dozens of bodies in various states of integration with the crystalline structure. Some had only begun the merge, arms or legs embedded in stone, faces pressed against facets, expressions frozen in joy or terror, or both simultaneously. Others were more complete, their forms twisted into impossible configurations. Bodies bent through dimensions they shouldn't be able to occupy. Flesh and crystal, meat and mineral, consciousness and math, all blended into a grotesque synthesis. And they were all still alive, still conscious, still aware. They sang, each one a note in the larger harmony, each contributing their unique frequency to the stone's eternal chorus. The sound, not sound, the meaning was overwhelming. A symphony of stolen souls performing a composition written in the language of dead civilizations. Vesh recognized faces. There, a woman in Astra Militarum fatigues, 47th Cadian insignia still visible on her partially mineralized shoulder. She'd been in Vesh's unit on Kaltos 4, dead 20 years. Except she wasn't dead. She was here, integrated with the stone, and when she saw Vesh, her crystal-embedded eyes focused and she smiled. "You came back," the woman said, voice harmonizing with the stone's song. "We knew you would. We've been waiting. We've been singing your name for 2 decades, calling you home. The stone knew you'd return. You're the key, the final piece, the one who completes the pattern. Other faces turned toward Vesh now. More people from Kaltos 4. The cult members she'd seen arranged in patterns throughout the hive. The civilians she'd failed to save. Even Throne Preserver, the child. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, half her body merged with the stone's surface, still wearing the remains of a school uniform. The child waved, fingers clicking with crystalline joints. "Don't let the song win, soldier," she said, repeating her last words from 20 years ago. "But we were wrong, weren't we? The song already won. It won the moment we heard it. You just haven't accepted yet." Vesh's mind was fragmenting. Reality was fracturing. She could feel herself beginning to understand the equations written on the mess hall walls, beginning to see the geometry that the bodies had formed, beginning to comprehend why they smiled. Then Mother's voice cut through the song, transmitted through Mira's vox bead, with such force that the ex-guardswoman cried out in pain. "Vesh, listen to me." Not maternal now. Desperate. Ancient. Exhausted beyond mortal comprehension. "I am not the ship's AI. I am the ship's prison." Mira's hand moved to her helmet, trying to tear out the vox bead, but her fingers wouldn't obey. Mother had seized control of her communication system, using it as a direct line to Vesh. 200 years, Mother continued, voice glitching with corruption and age. 200 years we've held this thing back. The original crew, in our final moments of sanity, we understood what we'd done, what we'd brought aboard. We uploaded ourselves, not to serve it, to contain it. The lights flickered, showing glimpses of data ghosts, translucent figures of the Carthage Dawn's crew, moving through the cargo hold, overlapping with the integrated victims. They were building, constantly building, reinforcing whatever metaphysical prison they'd constructed around the stone. "We sacrificed our individual consciousness," Mother said, "merged our minds into a collective entity. We've been fighting ever since, every moment, every second, holding it back from manifesting fully in real space. The agony is..." Her voice broke into static. "Beyond description. We are conscious of every nanosecond, aware of our own dissolution. We are dying by degrees and have been for 2 centuries. "Why tell me this?" Vesh demanded, still being pulled toward the stone. Kyle was ahead of her now, almost touching the crystal surface. "Because we're failing. Every salvage crew that boards feeds it, makes it stronger. And we realize now, we've been approaching this wrong. We can't destroy it. We tried. We can't eject it. It's woven itself into the ship's structure. But you can end this." "How?" "You survived its call on Kaltos 4. You're resistant. Contaminated but resistant. Like a body exposed to a disease. You carry antibodies." Mother's voice was fading, straining under the effort of communication. "The ship has a plasma core purge. Emergency protocol. If activated, it will destroy everything within a 3-kilometer radius. The ship, the stone, the victims, us. And how do I activate it while that thing is singing in my head?" "You don't. You can't. Not yet." Mother paused. "You have to touch the stone first. Interface with it. Let it connect to your consciousness. Then, while it's focused on you, while it's trying to integrate you into the pattern, you activate the purge." Vesh felt her blood run cold. "If I touch it, I become part of it." "Yes, if you fail." Mother's voice held terrible compassion. "But you survived once. You resisted on Kaltos 4 when everyone else succumbed. You're the only one who might be strong enough to hold out long enough to trigger the purge. And if I'm not, then you feed it the final piece it needs. It achieves critical mass, and something that's been trapped between dimensions for 60 million years finally manifests fully in real space. What it does then? Mother's voice dissolved into static-laced horror. We've seen its memories, fragments of what it was before it was severed, before the war in heaven cut it loose from whatever vast thing it was part of. If it completes itself, reality in this sector won't survive the birthday. A scream cut through the discussion. Harrow. The pilot had broken completely. His eyes were wild, pupils dilated to black holes, and he was laughing again, but this time with manic purpose. "We can take a piece," he howled, pushing past Vesh toward the stone. "Just a sample, just enough to clear the debt. We don't need the whole thing. Just a piece, just enough to be free." "Harrow, no." Vesh lunged for him, but the shifting gravity sent her tumbling wrong. Harrow reached the singing stone. His fingers touched its surface. Reality inverted. His body turned inside out in the span of a single heartbeat. Not metaphorically, literally. His interior became his exterior. Organs suddenly on the outside, skin and muscle facing inward, bones bent through impossible angles, as his entire physical structure folded through dimensions it wasn't meant to traverse. He died instantly. Should have died instantly. Consciousness should have ended with the brain's inversion. But the stone kept him aware. Harrow's folded form pressed into the crystal surface, integrated like all the others, and his voice joined the chorus. "It hurts," he sang, each word harmonizing with the greater whole. "It hurts so much. I can feel my nerve endings on the outside. I can feel air touching my brain. I can feel everything, and I can't die. I can't die. I can't die. Please, Vesh, please." His begging became another note in the song. Mira had raised her last pistol again. This time it fired. She aimed not at Kale, not at the stone, but at the breathing walls, the integrated victims, anything that moved. "Blow the ship!" she screamed, firing wildly. "Kill us all! It's the only way! We can't let this thing escape!" Her las bolts burned into crystallized flesh, but the victims didn't die. They just sang louder, incorporating the pain into the harmony. Kyle reached the stone. His augmetic hands touched the crystal surface, and the integration began immediately. His mechanical components started to merge, circuitry flowing into mineral, but something went wrong. The entity couldn't fully absorb the machine parts. They were creating interference, incompatible code, wrong mathematics. Kale's augmetics were fighting the integration on a fundamental level, and he was trapped between states. Half flesh merged with stone, half machine refusing to comply. His screams were binary, pure data howls of agony, as consciousness tried to exist in two incompatible formats simultaneously. But in his agony, Kale found purpose. His remaining control over his augmetics, the last fragments of free will buried in corrupted code, broadcast a signal. Not the stone's song, something else. An equation, a countersong, mathematical dissonance designed to interfere with the harmony. The stone's attention divided. For the first time since they'd boarded, the pressure in Vesh's skull lessened. The pull toward the crystal weakened. The singing faltered, just slightly, as it tried to compensate for Kale's interference. Mira grabbed Vesh's arm, and for a moment her eyes were clear, focused. The eyes of a soldier who'd accepted death and found peace in purpose. "I'll cover you," she said. "When I say run, you run. Don't look back. Don't stop. Promise me." "What will you—" "My whole life I've been afraid," Mira interrupted. "Afraid of dying. Afraid of failing. Afraid of not being strong enough." She smiled. Genuinely smiled. Not the corrupted joy of the stone's victims. Let me be brave just once. Let me matter. She pushed Vesh toward the stone, then turned and began firing. Not at the walls now, but at the integrated victims trying to reach for Vesh. Each shot bought seconds, each last bolt carved out moments of time. Go! Mira screamed. For the Emperor, for humanity. Go! Vesh ran, or tried to. The shifting gravity made it more like falling forward, but she moved. Toward the stone, toward Tobin's smiling face, toward Kale's half-merged form still screaming equations, toward Harrow's inside-out body still begging. Her hand extended, touched the crystal surface. Connection. Instant. Total. Absolute. She felt everything. Every consciousness integrated with the stone. 2 centuries of accumulated minds. Dozens of salvage crews. The original crew of the Carthage Dawn. The cultists from Kaltos 4. The child. The soldier from her unit. All of them, all at once, flooding into her awareness. And beneath them all, the entity itself. Not evil, not malicious, just hungry, just alone, just desperate with a loneliness that had lasted 60 million years. She saw its memories, fragmented, incomplete, but enough to understand. It had been part of something vast once, something that existed across dimensions, across realities, a being so immense that entire galaxies were just synapses in its consciousness. During the war in heaven, when the Old Ones fought the Necrons and reality itself was weaponized, it had been severed, cut loose. A fragment of infinite consciousness trapped in finite space. It didn't want to destroy. It didn't want to conquer. It wanted to be complete, to find the rest of itself, to end the loneliness. And it offered her everything. Knowledge, power, understanding of the universe's fundamental structure. She could save her crew, not as flesh, but as consciousness, eternal and aware. She could become a god. She could reshape reality according to her will. She could end all suffering, all fear, all loneliness. All she had to do was accept. All she had to do was merge. All she had to do was say yes. Her hand began merging with the crystal, flesh flowing into mineral. She could feel herself beginning to dissolve, beginning to integrate, beginning to understand why they all smiled. Behind her, Mira was still screaming her name, still firing, still buying seconds with her life. Vesh's consciousness was fracturing. Why resist? Why choose pain? Why choose mortality when immortality beckoned? Why choose loneliness when belonging offered itself freely? Then, memory. Kaltos IV. The temple. The child in the school uniform. Blood running from her nose, smiling that terrible smile as the cult integrated her into their pattern. But before, just before, when she'd still been human, when she'd still been afraid. Her last words before the smile, "Don't let the song win, soldier. Remember us. Remember us. Not as we became, as we were. Human, flawed, mortal. Real." Vesh's hand stopped merging. She was fighting, pushing back against the pull, rejecting the offer, choosing pain, choosing mortality, choosing to remember.
The stone began to crack.
Fine lines appeared across its surface, spiderwebbing out from where her hand touched. The singing hitched, faltered, became discordant. And for the first time, the entity spoke clearly. Not through victims, not through song. Its own voice, vast and terrible and infinitely curious. Interesting. Chapter 5. The Price of Silence. Vesh had always believed that heroism was dying for something greater than yourself. But as the singing stone's consciousness tried to hollow her out and wear her like a suit, she learned the truth. Heroism is choosing to live with what you've done, knowing you'll never be clean again. Inside her mind, the battlefield raged. The entity showed her everything. Every death she'd caused. Every salvager she'd led to their doom while unknowingly serving as its beacon. She saw their faces, heard their final screams, felt their terror as they realized too late what she'd brought them to. A crew on a mining station in the Coronis expanse. They'd followed her into a sealed section where reality was thin. All 7 dead within hours, tearing at their own eyes to stop seeing the patterns. Independent contractors on a derelict near the Ghoul Stars. She'd convinced them the risk was minimal. They'd painted equations on the walls with their own blood while she slept, never waking her, protecting her even as they died. A family of scavengers in the Calixis sector. Husband, wife, 2 children. She'd needed extra hands for a quick salvage run. They'd heard the singing through the ship's hull and opened the airlocks, walking into vacuum with smiles on their faces. Dozens of them, hundreds across 20 years. All dead because of her, all feeding the entity through her unknowing service. You were never a survivor, the entity's voice thundered through her fracturing consciousness. You were a harvester, my harvester, gathering the minds I needed to manifest. And now you complete the pattern. Accept, join, become. The pressure was overwhelming. Her sense of self was dissolving, boundaries between Vesh and the stone blurring. She could feel the other consciousnesses pressing in. Tobin's joy, Harrow's agony, Kale's screaming code, the child from Kaltos 4 welcoming her home. Accept. It would be so easy. Let go. Stop fighting. Stop hurting. Then, clarity. Sharp and cold as a knife between the ribs. Resistance wasn't about strength. It was about acceptance. The entity couldn't break someone who was already broken. It fed on the gap between what people were and what they wanted to be. The desperate trying to escape desperation. The guilty trying to shed guilt. The lonely trying to find connection. But Vesh had already accepted what she was. She stopped fighting the connection. Instead, she redirected it. If the entity wanted to experience her consciousness, she'd give it everything. Not just the surface, the depths. The guilt that woke her screaming. The self-loathing that made her check her crew's bunks at night to make sure they were still breathing. The knowledge that she was responsible for hundreds of deaths and could never, ever make it right. She forced the entity to feel her humanity. Not the idealized version, the raw, bleeding, broken reality of it. The weight of every failure, the texture of grief, the taste of self-hatred, the sound of a child's last words, the smell of blood, and the feeling of being the only one left alive and wishing desperately that you weren't. Human emotion at intensity the entity had never experienced. Guilt and love and rage and sorrow and the terrible crushing weight of being mortal and knowing you're mortal and choosing to continue anyway. The stone couldn't process it. Emotions weren't variables in its mathematics. Pain wasn't quantifiable in its equations. Human consciousness wasn't meant to be infinite and perfect. It was meant to be finite and flawed and beautiful in its imperfection. The entity recoiled, and for the first time in 60 million years, it felt something like confusion. What are you? It demanded, voice fracturing. You're supposed to want completion. You're supposed to embrace infinity. Why do you choose limitation? Why do you choose pain? Because I'm already broken, Vesh said, her voice resonating through the connection, through the stone, through every integrated consciousness. You can't break me worse than I've broken myself. That's the difference between us. I accept what I am. You're still trying to be whole. But me, I've made peace with being shattered. The cracks in the stone widened. Spiderweb patterns spread across its surface, each fracture point glowing with wrong-colored light. The singing became discordant, harmonies collapsing into chaos. But Vesh was cracking too. She could feel her mind fragmenting under the strain, thoughts scattering, memories dissolving, the structure of her consciousness beginning to collapse. She wouldn't survive this much longer. Connection would kill her as surely as integration. Behind her, through the haze of pain and dissolution, she heard Mira screaming, still fighting, still buying time. The ex-guardswoman had fought through dozens of integrated victims, each one trying to pull her into the stone's embrace. Her uniform was shredded, blood running from a dozen wounds. Her augmetic arm, a simple prosthetic from an old combat injury, had been torn off entirely, sparking and bleeding hydraulic fluid. But she'd reached the plasma core control panel. It was embedded in the wall near the stone's base, a redundant system that the original crew had kept accessible, even as they transformed the hold into a prison. Emergency protocol, last resort, the option that ended everything. Mira stared at it, then at Vesh still connected to the stone, still fighting, still being consumed by inches. She understood immediately. Vesh couldn't activate it while connected. The moment the purge began, she'd need to run, and she couldn't run while merged with the crystal. But if she disconnected now, without completing the communion, the shock would leave her catatonic, brain dead, a vegetable. Someone else had to make the call. Mira's vox crackled to life. "Remember what you taught me?" Her voice was steady despite the blood loss, despite the pain. "First lesson you ever gave me when I signed onto your crew. Someone has to make the hard call. Someone has to carry the weight. This is my call, Captain." "Mira, no," Vesh tried to say, but her voice was lost in the connection's static. Mira's fingers moved over the plasma core controls. Authorization codes, safety override, purge sequence initialization, 60 seconds. The countdown began, displayed on every screen in the hold. Numbers ticking down, reality's death certificate being written in real time. "You were a terrible captain," Mira said, and she was smiling now, genuinely smiling, not the corrupted joy of the stone's victims. Just a soldier finding peace in purpose, too guilty, too haunted. "You cared too much about us and not enough about yourself. You made bad calls trying to protect us. You risked the mission to save crew members who weren't worth saving." She pulled her last pistol, checked the charge, half depleted. "Enough. But you were my captain. You gave me a berth when no one else would hire ex-guard with Section 8 discharge. You trusted me with weapons when everyone else saw me as liability. You treated me like I mattered." Her voice caught, just for a moment. "So I'm returning the favor. Now get the hell off this ship and live well enough for both of us." Mira raised her weapon and fired directly into the control console. Sparks erupted, circuits fused, the purge sequence locked in. No abort possible now, no override, no mercy. 53 seconds. The integrated victims surged toward Mira, dozens of them, bodies twisted in impossible configurations, reaching with crystal-studded hands. She turned to face them, weapon raised, still smiling. "For the Emperor," she said quietly. "For humanity. For my captain." Then they were on her, pulling her down, tearing at her, beginning the integration process. Mira fired until her charge pack depleted, then switched to her combat knife, then to her bare hands, fighting until the end. The last thing Vesh saw before her connection broke was Mira's face, still smiling, still genuine, still human, as the crystal claimed her. 47 seconds. Vesh tore herself from the stone. The pain was indescribable, like ripping off her own skin, like pulling her brain out through her skull. She left pieces of herself behind, memories, thoughts, fragments of consciousness that would never fully return. But she was free. Kyle's corrupted augmetics released one final pulse, electromagnetic surge that opened emergency bulkheads, suppressed the integrated victim's movements, carved a path through the chaos. His last act of will buried somewhere in the screaming code. His voice emerged, mechanical and distorted, barely recognizable. "Flee, Captain. Tell Mars, tell them the Omnissiah's light couldn't reach here. Some places too dark, even for the machine god." Then silence. Just the countdown and the singing, and the sound of the ship beginning to tear itself apart. 40 seconds. Vesh ran, stumbled, crawled, through corridors that were folding in on themselves, past integrated victims reaching for her, under collapsing archways, and over deck plates that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Mother's voice guided her, transmitted through failing speakers. "Airlock 7. Your ship is still docked. Straight ahead, then right, then up the service ladder. You have 30 seconds. "Come with me," Vesh gasped, lungs burning. "I can download you. Emergency data core. You don't have to die." "I'm already gone, child." Mother's voice was fading, the collective consciousness finally releasing its grip after 2 centuries of torment. "This is just my echo. The original crew. We've been dead for so long. We've just been too stubborn to stop fighting." A sound that might have been laughter. "Besides, we're tired. We're all so very tired. Thank you for letting us rest." 30 seconds. Vesh reached Airlock 7. The bitter prophet was still there, still docked, waiting patiently for a crew that would never return. She cycled through, magnetic seals releasing, and stumbled into her ship's familiar corridor. 20 seconds. Her fingers flew over the pilot controls. Emergency separation, full thrust, maximum distance. The bitter prophet's engines screamed to life, pushing her away from the Carthage Dawn. 10 seconds. Through the viewport, Vesh watched. The derelict hung in space, still pristine, still perfect, still wrong. The running lights that had burned for 2 centuries flickered once. 5 seconds. Then the Carthage Dawn's plasma core purged. But it didn't explode, not in any conventional sense. The ship imploded, folding into itself, reality collapsing around the singing stone like paper crumpling. Dimensions that shouldn't touch pressed together, space-time itself rejecting the paradox. The implosion was silent, no sound in vacuum, but Vesh felt it in her bones, in her soul, in the parts of her mind still connected to the stone. For one eternal moment, the ship existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Then it winked out, simply ceased to be, not destroyed, erased, removed from reality like a syntax error corrected in the universe's code. The space where it had been was wrong. Stars visible through the gap were distorted, their light bent through angles that violated physics. The void itself bore a scar, a permanent mark where something that should never have existed had briefly touched real space. Vesh sat in the pilot's chair and wept. 1 month later, she stood in a Medici facility on Port Wanda, staring at her reflection in the polished metal wall. The physical wounds had healed, broken ribs mended, lacerations closed. The hand that had touched the stone bore faint crystalline scars that no surgery could remove, but functionally it worked. The mental wounds hadn't healed, would never heal. She still heard the song at night, still saw the patterns when she closed her eyes, still felt the weight of every consciousness that had been integrated with the stone, their final moments playing on loop in her damaged memory. The inquisitorial agent sat across from her, his face hidden behind a featureless mask, rosette hanging openly at his collar. "You did well, Captain Vesh," he said, voice modulated through a vox distorter. "Most people who touch those artifacts don't retain personhood. They become," he gestured vaguely, "something else. But you're functional. Mostly. Functional," Vesh repeated hollowly. "The Carthage Dawn's fate is classified at the highest level. Your testimony has been recorded and sealed. You will not speak of this to anyone, ever." He leaned forward. "But the Inquisition has use for people like you. People who've survived cognito hazards. People who've touched the void and come back changed but intact. We need operatives who can recognize the signs, who can face the horrors that others can't even perceive." He slid a data slate across the table. "Join us. Serve the Imperium. Give meaning to what you survived." Vesh looked at the slate, at the inquisitorial seal, at the promise of purpose and the threat of damnation equally mixed. "No," she said quietly. "I'm done." She'd sold the bitter profit, used the credits to pay off Harrow's family's debts. The Varneshi syndicate accepted payment and left them alone, sent support funds to Mira's pension account, which would go to her elderly parents, made anonymous donations to the Mechanicus shrine where Kale had trained in his name, kept only Tobin's medkit as a reminder. Now she stood in a small chapel on a shrine world whose name she'd already forgotten. Rows of candles flickered in the darkness, prayers made light, hope made tangible. She lit 5 candles, one for each crew member. Then she began lighting others, one for every person on Kaltos 4, one for every salvager who'd died because of her. She'd researched their names, compiled lists, spent hours in archives tracking down every death she could attribute to her unknowing service as the entity's beacon. Hundreds of candles. The chapel blazed with light by the time she finished, and she knew it would never be enough. She'd light candles for the rest of her life, and the guilt would never balance. The debt could never be paid, but she'd do it anyway. She looked up at the Imperium's eagle iconography above the altar, the Emperor's symbol, wings spread, watching over humanity. And she wondered, did he feel guilt? Did he carry the weight of every human who died in his name? Did he light candles in the dark? Or was that the difference between gods and mortals? Gods could forget. Vesh turned and walked out into the city street. Normal life surrounded her, people going about their business, unaware of the horrors lurking in the void between stars. Children playing, merchants hawking wares. Life continuing because no one knew how close it had come to ending. She saw them differently now, walking blind through a galaxy of horrors, protected only by ignorance and luck and the sacrifice of people whose names would never be remembered. Mother had asked which of them loved the others most. At the time, Vesh had thought it was a trick question, but walking away, sole survivor again, she finally understood. The answer was, whichever of them loved the others enough to live with having failed them. Thus ends our chronicle of the Carthage Dawn, a ship that should have been forgotten, a cargo that should have been destroyed, and salvagers who deserved better than the void's cold arithmetic of sacrifice. You've witnessed cosmic horror in its purest form, Voidwalker. Not the spectacle of demons or the brutality of Xenos, but the quiet terror of realities touching that should remain separate. The patient hunger of things older than human comprehension. The price paid by those who venture into darkness, seeking fortune and finding only truth. Remember Captain Vesh and her crew. Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite fear's overwhelming presence. Remember that sometimes the greatest victory is survival, even when survival means carrying unbearable weight. If this tale of sacrifice and sorrow has resonated with you, let it be known by leaving a like, a small beacon of acknowledgement in the dark. To continue walking with us, through the void's bleakest corners. Subscribe to Voidborn Terrors and activate notifications. Your thoughts and suggestions for future chronicles are always welcome in the comments below. Should you wish to support these transmissions further, you'll find links in the description. As always, your support is appreciated but never mandated. We are honored simply by your presence in the dark with us. Until we meet again, Voidwalker, remember, not all treasures are worth finding, and some silences should never be broken. The galaxy is vast and filled with wonders, but also with horrors that sing in frequencies the human soul was never meant to hear. Stay vigilant, stay human, and trust nothing that sings. This is Voidborn Terrors, signing off from the dark between stars. The void watches, the void waits, and sometimes the void sings, but we do not answer.